Tropes! Get your tropes here. We have some fantastic cliches for you today, and a drop-in character quality the likes you've only seen in The Hobbit. You're looking for a heartthrob rebel pulled straight out of the 90s? You got it. Junkie from Jersey with a chip on her shoulder? Right here. Nerdy kid with glasses, a dental health problem, and insatiable love for video games and the great indoors? You better believe it. What about the police officer with no social life and whose greatest pride is his devotion to his job? I know I'm guilty of that one, folks. And let's not forget the hardened military type who abuses the goodwill thrown towards her for profit. All the cliches and character tropes you could ever want right here, folks. And from a revered developer who definitely knows how to make better characters, no less. And today only, folks, you get the greatest hits of these tropes for the ridiculous price of $20. You won't believe what other characters these sorry sacks got lumped together with. Come get your underdeveloped characters before they're gone! As I mentioned before, inFAMOUS is a series about the origin story of a superhero. An ordinary person comes upon an extraordinary circumstance. For Cole, it was opening a package he was delivering to find a bomb that gave him superpowers. For Delson, he got too careless near a marked criminal that survived a convoy crash and got powers from touching his hands to protect his brother. From there, we get to see both protagonists struggle with their powers and learn through them, and also deal with the consequences of being gifted with these burdens. The issue, though, is that Cole is more of a dynamic character, while Delson is mostly static. Cole starts out wanting nothing to do with being a superhero, and ends the game understanding that he has a responsibility to protect Empire City. Delson, on the other hand, starts the game as a rebel, and ends the game as a rebel. He remains the same throughout the game, a trait that is more common in a side character or an antagonist rather than the main protagonist. At one point, Delson pledges to be more responsible, but in truth he doesn't really do any much different after this scene than what he was doing before. To put it simply, Delson wants to disrupt the operations of the DUP, whether for the good of all conduits or simply for himself. At the end of the game, he comes upon a revelation of what Augustine's true intentions are. This does not change his view of them at all, and he continues on with his disruptions. If anything, Delson makes one change in the story, and it's near the very beginning. When he first gets his powers, he seems to share the same perception of conduits as Reggie does. However, once he heads off to Seattle, he suddenly seems to completely change his opinion on conduits, even though he has not seen an example of any single conduit that would oppose his viewpoint. Delson's values as a whole do not change throughout the game. Nothing changes about the way he intrudes on property with his art. His concern for his tribe does not change whether good or evil. His relationship with most characters do not change, with the exception of Hank. The world does not change him, even in the wake of his brother's death, and he hardly changes the world without particular help. In a team lineup, Delson is the muscle while everyone else is the brain. If nothing else, Delson offers to be a rally point for the idea of change while not being a very dynamic character himself. In order to make a strong character, the character must have a conflict of want versus need. It's basically exactly what it sounds like. A character wants something throughout the story, and he needs something to change him in order to become a better person and find happiness in his life. The want is the plot of the story, while the need is the theme of the story. You can see this in the Lord of the Rings, how Frodo wants to destroy the ring, but he needs Sam to help him to reach the top of Mount Doom. Before he realizes this, however, Frodo dismisses Sam and doesn't want his help. In Toy Story, Woody wants to be Andy's favorite toy and tries to undermine Buzz's happiness, but eventually realizes that he needs to share Andy's love in order to truly be happy. In the inFAMOUS universe, let's go back to Cole. In the first game, Cole wants to leave Empire City and escape the tragedy and circumstance that he finds himself in the longer he remains there. However, what he needs is to realize that the city is his responsibility as well as its citizens, and he stays to be the hero that the city desperately needs. This is why Cole is a more interesting character. People say he was a goody two-shoes hero when, in fact, it took him the whole length of the first game to get to that point. He wanted nothing to do with his powers, or even anything to do with helping Empire City get back on its feet. He wanted to leave and avoid the problem entirely. It's only after Trish is killed and John leads him to the Ray Sphere that Cole understands that if he continues to avoid his problems, that they will only grow worse. This lesson is solidified when he discovers who Kessler is and why he has come to Empire City in the first place. Delson does not have this sort of depth. We have a want, that he wants to get more powers in order to save the Akomish. But what is his need? What does Delson need in order to become a better person? How is he supposed to change in order to meet that goal? The answer is that he does not have a need. One would say it's to become more responsible, and you would assume this comes immediately after Reggie's death. when in reality, Delsin continues to be irresponsible without his brother's guidance. He goes on a rampage against the DUP and incapacitates them instead of getting answers. Maybe it's when Augustine is trying to convince the city that Delsin is a murderer when in reality he never killed a single DUP agent, and that's exactly the point. Delsin never changed to make this point stronger. He never changed in order to prove Augustine wrong. He either always was or always wasn't exactly what she wants the public to see him as. What is the theme of Second Son? To not judge a book by its cover? To not have prejudice based on what you see on TV? None of these apply to Delsin himself. He does not learn these lessons. This is a lesson more for Reggie and the human populace as a whole than Delsin. Delsin, by this standard, is half of a character, perhaps even less of a character than the rest of the cast. And by effect, you do not have an emotional connection to Delsin as much as you would to Reggie. When I see people trying to argue that Delsin is a better character than Cole, they often try to say that he is a funnier character that somehow makes him superior. I certainly didn't know that a funny character is the best character of all time and nothing else competes with it. Personally, my favorite characters are the ones that have depth, the ones that are realistic and believable, the ones that we see go through hardships and are changed by them. Sometimes this character can also be the one with a sense of humor. Delsin, however, is none of these things. I invite you to think of a single instance of Delsin being comedic. Odds are you probably thought of one of these moments.
It's just me, Betty. Would you put this stapler down? Seriously.
Well, you know, I also get nervous around pretty girls.
That's that pitching are we, huh?
Delsin! Promise me you'll play it cool up ahead.
Hey, they used to call me Mr. Cool.
No one has ever once called you that. Ever.
You know what they say? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single kick-ass tag.
Who says that?
The Chinese people. No, he ran fast, like really, really fast. Conduit fast, man. Screw flesh-eating death gaze. I don't want that. Hey, Reg, I was just thinking about the bras.
Well, stop, okay? Seriously, just stop.
So what held you up?
Girl stuff.
Ew, what kind of girl stuff? Fetch, I'm on the docks.
And I'm here on the roof. What, you couldn't wait a few more minutes?
This is why I hate working with girls. Well, no wonder it took me so long. Fetch, you said dolphin, but clearly, this is a porpoise. It's a common mistake.
This is why I hate working with boys.
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks, man. I couldn't have done it without you. Oh, wait, I already did.
Owen, thank you for all your help. Couldn't have done it without you. Oh, wait, I already did.
I know, it wasn't funny the first time. I guess if you got stuck with only one power, invisibility isn't so bad.
No kidding, right? I've been planning what I would do if I could turn invisible since I hit puberty.
And this conversation is now over.
Do you notice a pattern? Delsin's brand of humor is immature and narcissistic. While Cole wasn't the funniest of characters, he had a few well-placed comments that got a chuckle out of me, and they were at least unique enough to be memorable.
You alright?
Yeah, fit as a fiddle.
It's a big-ass fiddle.
It's a hixicle.
Now, one of my boys thinks she's working with DARPA.
You have boys?
If she's in with those clowns, you better watch out, son.
Yeah. And Santa Claus shot JFK.
The other thing I see people defend Delsin for is that he had only one game to develop where Cole had 2.5 games and a comic. My argue on this is that you can make a beloved character in one scene or one page, but it takes effort and care to do so. Let me give you a few examples of characters that had one game to develop their characters. Booker DeWitt is a better character than Delsin. Sam Drake is a better character than Delsin. Joel is a better character than Delsin. Talion is a better character than Delsin. Hell, even Snow Villiers is a better character than Delsin, even though the two of them are almost identical. You know what each of these characters have in common? Yes, Troy Baker plays all of them. You can put your hand down now. The answer is that we see each of them a significant period of time before the story took place. We get to see what their lives were like before they had become the person they were during the games. We get to see the tragedies that formed their motives, their morals, and their relationships with other characters. Joel is hardened by losing his daughter and spending 20 years surviving an infected apocalypse, and thereby spends the game warming up to Ellie. Sam is the eldest of the two Morgan brothers and does his best to take care of Nate, and we also get to see his fascination of Avery taking shape and define the two brothers for the rest of their lives. We get to see Booker trade his own daughter only to become a mercenary to correct his mistake later in life. In contrast, we don't get any backstory for Delsin. We don't even get a little smidgen that might even give us a clue of who he is or why he acts the way he does. All we get is one little line that is treated like a throwaway.
Is this how you want to leave your mark on the world, huh? You think this would make our parents proud? Misdemeanor vandalism?
Why is this not elaborated on? Who were their parents? What happened to them? How old were Delsin and Reggie when they ceased to be in their lives? How does this impact Delsin? We don't know. Why does Delsin spray paint instead of any other medium? Why did he never learn how to swim when he lives in a fishing community? Why does he dislike authority to the point where he's embarrassed about Reggie being a cop? We don't know. Delsin is as thin as the cardboard that he uses for stencils. Since I'm talking about Delsin, I might as well talk about Reggie since they share a few of the same problems. Why is he a cop? Is it because his parents died? Does he hate conduits so much because of TV news brainwashing, or were his parents killed by a conduit? He and Delsin have a pretty good relationship given that he arrested him multiple times. Am I the only one that finds Reggie a little hard to pin down? Doesn't he seem to contradict himself? Now, I see the benefit of giving Reggie an internal and external conflict that present problems for him. This is the presence of his needs and wants. If anything, I applaud that they gave him that sort of depth. However, this conflict manifests to Reggie that he sees the Akomish as being dead already since he doesn't want Delsin to get captured trying to save them. He obviously loves Delsin more than anything, and would prefer him to give up and go home where the two of them can live in Salmon Bay by themselves as the rest of the community dies off. But if he helps Delsin, then there's the possibility that Delsin could be detained indefinitely and Reggie would be left alone with no one else in the world. How does he overcome this? By doubling down and helping Delsin even when he knows it's a horrible idea, which he loves to rub in your face during that certain mission.
What the hell happened? It's a trap, man. Hank let us out here so Augustine could kill us.
Reggie also hates conduits but leaves an exception for Delsin because they're brothers. And for as many times as this comes up, I'm fascinated that we don't get to understand their relationship more as siblings. But I'm an only child, so I don't understand brothers in the first place. All I know is that Sam and Nate did a really good fucking job with me believing this concept when half the community thinks Sam shouldn't exist in the first place. Reggie hates conduits throughout the whole game and hardly budges when it comes to Fetch and Eugene. Even when Hank offers to get the two back from the concrete island, Reggie holds his stance that the world would be better off with leaving them back in the hands of the DUP. And like an intelligent person, he does not trust Hank. In fact, no one trusts Hank. And as quickly as Reggie refuses to help bust these people out, we have a quick transition and Reggie has changed his mind because suddenly he agrees with his brother that conduits are people too. And while it's true that Reggie has a moment to be the hero, this shift in perspective and character goes south. Way south. Like bottom of the ocean south. And yes, I'll admit that I cried the first time. But every time after that, I realized that his death could have been handled much better. And while I'd love to talk about this moment at length, I'm going to save that rant for the portion of the series where I specifically talk about story. The short version is that Reggie's death was not earned, and that Sucker Punch literally threw him into the situation on a whim to make you feel something other than boredom and nausea. All of what I said does not change on whether Delsin is good or evil. Even if his younger brother is abusing people, attacking police officers, and killing people willy-nilly, Reggie will still say that he is proud of Delsin and that he loves him. This is also on top of Delsin threatening to break his nose if he disagrees with him. Going back to the subject of focusing on the wrong characters for the bulk of the game, guess which character doesn't even get his own comic book cutscene designated to tell his backstory? Delsin. The main protagonist doesn't get his own comic book cutscene. Sure, he narrates one that only talks about the collaborative efforts between himself and his allies, but he doesn't even get one to talk about himself. Not only did Cole get a handful of cutscenes to talk about his past and even give exposition on the world and the factions, we get to learn a lot more about what he was like, how his thoughts translated into his understanding and intuition of situations. Instead, this game reserves them for Delsin learning about the backgrounds of other characters. The game circumnavigates the important task of learning about other characters by spending time and building a relationship with them. He just absorbs their memories and knows exactly who they are and how they got their powers and what their motivation is. Isn't that disappointing that the side characters and even the antagonist are treated better than the player character? Fetch even gets her own game that is leagues better than this sack of manure. Let's also address that Fetch in her own game gets to narrate comic cutscenes about her background, and in this one as well. We get to understand her better than any other character in this second generation of games, and she's a side character. For that reason, Fetch is probably my favorite character out of all of them in this game. But if we're being fair here and only focusing on Second Son, you can tell that they're holding back Fetch as a character so that you can get to know her in first light. Her and Delsin get into a fling simply because they both have an issue with authority, and Delsin is essentially the only guy that understands her by poking around in her brain and helping her out with the drug dealers. She's a badass in purple that shoots pink lasers. Somehow they didn't mess that up. But all in all, we only get to know her in Second Son as the druggie that killed her brother and takes her anger out on other people. Speaking of taking my anger out on other people, let's talk about Eugene. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about Eugene? He's a gamer. He's a nerd. In that sense, he's just like you and me. Or at least that's what Sucker Punch was going for. Serious question here, guys. Why is it that whenever there's a gamer or nerd in video games, that they're basically all carbon copies of each other? Eugene is the same as Zero from Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and Big Al in the Ratchet & Clank series. These characters always drive me up a wall because I have never met a single gamer that acts like any of these characters. Nasally voiced, extremely introverted, guaranteed to be bullied in school, social anxiety issues, cowardly, living in their mother's basement, and being stuck to the subject of their fandom for unhealthy lengths of time. Now sure, I've heard about people who get absorbed into an MMO so bad that they stand up and die from poor blood circulation. But that's like one poor soul a year. Why is it that movies, TV shows, and games depict nerds like this? Are you guys like this? I'm not like this. I'm a normal person. I have a job, I went to school, I went to college, I play games, I have other hobbies. Why is it Eugene is the same caricature that we've seen a million times over? Do they expect us to feel sympathetic for him? Honestly, I'm more insulted that Eugene is Sucker Punch's representation of a gamer, of their target audience. Let me ask you, if you had Eugene's powers, would you be too scared to use them? Would you not want to fly out in the town on pixelated wings or summon any weapon that you could imagine? Eugene literally has the best power ever to make his imagination come to life, but he's too scared to use it. Would you be? I'd be all over that shit. Fuck playing games, I'd be out making the games come to life. And then, how does Eugene's arc end? Delsin picks him up, brushes him off, and says, "Get a life." No, really, he shames his sex life and says he needs to go out into the real world. We all get that from our parents, and this is what Delsin says to him. Now yes, you can't just sit on your ass and wait for life to happen to you. You need to put yourself out there and take risks to progress and lead a better life. Unless you're the kind of person who's fortunate enough to have a substantial amount of wealth where you can throw money at people and make your life instantly better. I get that that's what they're going for, but coming from Delsin, it sounds more like the jock is telling the nerd to get a life. The extrovert has to come in and save the introvert. Being an introvert is not a bad thing. Some people are just more reserved and prefer privacy to consistently being in public. And it's not like Eugene was completely useless. He was doing espionage on the DUP and using his angels to disrupt their capture and transport of potential conduits, even freeing them. Eugene was doing nothing wrong. Hell, he was even doing more to stop the DUP than Fetch was, and he never left his basement hideout. But nope, Delsin tells him to go outside for 30 minutes a day and do stuff. And guess what happens? He gets captured and needs to be saved by Delsin. I thought that Sucker Punch was better than copying and pasting a cliche character trope, but Eugene sadly proved me dead wrong. This is not how you portray your fan base. This is how you insult them. Speaking of insults, let's talk about how hard Second Son tries to distance itself from its predecessors, but made a character that looks very similar to Cole. Yes, I understand that he's a criminal, but they couldn't give him even a little of a hard-ass hairstyle? A buzz cut? A mohawk? Balding? Anything? And like all the other baseline cliche characters, Hank is the habitual regular to the inside of a jail cell for theft and who knows what else. His powers enabled him to do worse things so he could pull off crime after crime and got thrown into Curtain K. And of course, spending most of his life in jail gave him time to figure out how to escape from such places like it's no big deal, and he escapes from the military transport like nothing. And since we have no reason to trust him, he later shows up to try and trick Delsin into walking into a trap. And of course, Delsin is dumb enough to listen to him because they are both conduits. Afterwards, we find out that Hank actually has a daughter that was kidnapped by Augustine and who is being used as leverage to get him to lure Delsin into a trap. By this point, it's almost entirely out of left field with the exception of one brief mention by Eugene. There's also apparently another aspect to his character that is spelled out in Paper Trail that Hank doesn't like people to get hurt, which is rather odd for a lifelong criminal who goes around blasting cops and military figures with smoke. Assumedly, he means for innocent people not to get hurt, like Betty or Reggie, but guess who got all those people killed and or fatally injured? No, I don't give a fuck that your daughter is on a boat waiting for you on the river. If you really loved her and wanted to be with her, you wouldn't have been such a sorry excuse for a human being, and you deserve to get choked out. You're the one that deserves to stay in Curtain Cave for all eternity, fuck you, Hank. And last but not least, we have our main antagonist. And I'll be honest here, guys, I'm at odds to say that Augustine may be the best character in the game if we're ignoring extensions to this game like First Light. She is a fleshed out character, we know her motives, we see the lengths that she'll go to reach her goal, and we even get to see the two different faces that she wears. Now, I often see that Augustine is basically Bertrand, but a woman. Even I say this from time to time, but this is only to the extent that she hides her true intention from the public and persuades the public to hate conduits. She differs from Bertrand in a major way that she is driven by compassion for conduits, not self-loathing. She tricks people into hating conduits so that she can protect them in Curtain K, not creating a war to give humanity an all-you-can-shoot conduit gallery. However, this is also Augustine's flaw and what makes her the opposition to Delsin, at least on the good side. Delsin is willing to create peace between humans and conduits and give humanity a chance, where Augustine does not give anyone a choice in how they conduct themselves but her. She forces humanity to be the hunters where the conduits are forced to be the hunted, to keep peace. She's essentially keeping herself dug into a hole to keep these antagonistic relationships between the two parties. Augustine is clearly not an idiot, and she's very intelligent and is sure to have contingency plans for most anything. However, she's set in her ways and is willing to sacrifice whatever human pawn she needs in order to maintain her agenda. Although she feels like the most thought-out character, unfortunately the reveal of her intention comes far too late in the narrative for the player to empathize with her or take her side. I will also address this as well during the story section of the series, as it's something that I feel like is a major setback to the overall impact of the game. At the end of the day, Second Son had ample potential to do better on their characters. There are less characters in the spotlight than any other main Infamous game. 8 for the first game, 7 in the second, and now 6 in Second Son. This isn't a bad thing, it means they had more room and more time to focus on each character. In my own experience writing Legacy of the Beast, I had to cut the number of main characters down from dozens to 8, and it's liberating to be able to have a handful of characters that each get their time to shine and have an effect on the plot. But in this case, less effort was given when given a greater opportunity. As I've said many times before, this game has an amazing cast, but even the holy trinity of Troy Baker, Travis Willingham, and Laura Bailey cannot save unfinished characters. Acting can only bring a character so far, and with half a script, this leads to the actors needing to rely on ad-libbing, chemistry, and minimal direction to get through the production. Imagine how much better the quality of the game would have been if we had one of the characters go through a period of betrayal, guilt, soul-searching, and forgiveness like Zeke does. What if any of these characters went through the immense loss and rise to bolstering his self-confidence and finding purpose like Cole does? Cole doesn't take one hit and makes it through, he gets knocked down multiple times and keeps getting up again. What if any of them went through losing their family and was so scarred by the event that they resort to adopting corrupted monsters like Nyx in order to feel like she wasn't alone anymore? These characters had potential, and it's sad to see Sucker Punch didn't put as much heart and soul into Second Son's cast as they did with any game in their history as a developer.